January 24th, 1943, 10:31 in the morning. Point Cruz, Guadalcanal. Second Lieutenant James Robert Mitchell is floating in muddy water up to his chin, holding a Winchester Model 70 rifle built by his dead father, with exactly one bullet left in the chamber, while 6 Japanese soldiers close in on his position from 3 directions. In 90 seconds at least, 3 of them will be dead. The question is, will James be the 4th? James can hear them now. Boots sucking mud. Rhythmic. Methodical. 30 yards out. Maybe less. They found his boot prints leading straight to this crater like a trail of breadcrumbs drawn in blood and desperation. The Winchester is held vertically against his chest, barrel pointing at grey sky. He cannot let water enter the bore. If moisture gets inside, hydraulic pressure will turn this precision instrument into a pipe bomb in his hands. The explosion would take his face off before the Japanese ever got a shot. He has 1 cartridge. The brass casing sits in the chamber, 150 grains of lead waiting for the firing pin. 1 chance to make this right. 5 men minimum are converging on his position. He counted their voices. Maybe 6. The math is fatal. This is how James Robert Mitchell's war ends. Not with a medal ceremony. Not with a parade down Main Street in Rockford, Illinois. Floating in a shell crater in the South Pacific, killed by his own success. Because 4 days ago, James made a mistake. He proved the experts wrong. Now you're probably thinking, how does a man with 1 bullet and a bolt-action rifle fight off 6 soldiers armed with semi-automatics? He doesn't. At least not the way you'd expect. What happens in the next 4 minutes will be studied at Fort Benning for the next 80 years. It will appear in 3 different sniper manuals, and it will save James's life. But to understand how he survives, you need to understand why he's in that crater with 1 bullet.
And that story starts 6 weeks earlier, with a rifle the entire battalion called a toy. The Winchester Model 70 that James is holding underwater was built in 1938. It's a bolt-action sporting rifle designed to kill elk in the Rocky Mountains. It has a Lyman Alaskan scope his father mounted before dying in a hunting accident in 1936. Every officer James served under told him to leave it behind. Called it a mail order, sweetheart. Said it was too slow, too delicate, too civilian for war. But in the past 4 days, this toy rifle killed 11 Japanese snipers. Precision kills at ranges where M1 Garands couldn't even see targets. The Japanese have a name for James now. Yuri, the ghost. Because their best marksmen keep dying, and nobody sees who's shooting. Before we show you how James survives that crater, this story took 40 hours to research. We went through declassified Army records at the National Archives. We examined James's personal notebook at the National Firearms Museum.
We cross-referenced Japanese casualty reports captured after the war. If you value deep dives into forgotten military innovations where ordinary Americans solved extraordinary problems, hit that subscribe button right now. It tells YouTube to share this with more people who care about the ingenuity that won World War II. Now let's rewind 4 days to the moment James's war changed forever. But first we need to go back even further. To understand the rifle, you need to understand the man. And to understand the man, you need to understand October 14th, 1936. James Robert Mitchell was 18 years old when he found his father's body. Rockford, Illinois. 3 miles outside town in woods, the Mitchell family had hunted for 2 generations. The trees were turning, reds and golds, the kind of autumn afternoon that makes you believe the world is good. His father, Robert Mitchell Sr., age 45, lying face up beside a creek. Winchester Model 70, 6 feet away. Single gunshot wound through the chest. Exit wound the size of a fist suggested the rifle was 4 to 5 feet from the body when it fired. The coroner ruled it accidental discharge. Said Robert must have stumbled. Rifle went off. Killed himself instantly. But 18-year-old James counted the steps, measured the distance, studied the angle. Something didn't add up. His father was an experienced hunter. 32 years of hunting these woods. Men like that don't make mistakes with firearms. They treat weapons with the kind of respect you reserve for loaded mousetraps and rattlesnakes. James's mother, Eleanor, wanted to sell the rifle. Said it killed her husband. Said it was cursed. Said no good would come from keeping it. James refused. The rifle didn't kill Dad. Something else did. Could have been accident. Could have been something else. He never said the word suicide out loud, but he thought it. His father had been drinking more, quieter, distant. The depression had closed the factory where he'd worked for 22 years. The mortgage was 5 months behind. Eleanor was taking in laundry from neighbors just to buy flour. James needed to understand, not just what happened, but how it happened. If he could master the rifle, understand its mechanics completely, maybe he could make sense of his father's death. So he taught himself to shoot. By age 20, James could put 5 shots into a 2-inch circle at 100 yards. By 22, he was shooting 6-inch groups at 400 yards, using nothing but the Lyman Alaskan scope his father had mounted. 2.5 power magnification, barely better than squinting. By 23, he won the Illinois State Championship, 1939, youngest winner in state history, shot against men twice his age with twice his experience. The secret wasn't talent, it was obsession. Every time James looked through that scope, he saw his father's face. Every trigger squeeze was a question asking the universe what really happened that day. The rifle became a meditation, a prayer, a conversation with a dead man. James enlisted December 10th, 1941, 3 days after Pearl Harbor. He packed the Winchester carefully, wrapped in oilcloth, protected from moisture, same way his father had taught him. His mother Eleanor stood on the porch as he loaded his duffel into the army truck. She was 49 but looked 65. The depression and widowhood had aged her like time-lapse photography. "That rifle took your father. Don't let it take you too." James kissed her forehead. Maybe it's time the rifle saved someone instead. He didn't know that in 14 months that rifle would kill 14 men, that the Japanese would call him Yurei, that military historians would study his techniques for 80 years. All he knew was he needed to master what he didn't understand. December 18th, 1942, Camp Forest, Tennessee. James unpacked the Winchester in the armory. The room smelled of gun oil and testosterone, and the particular brand of military arrogance that comes from men who've never been shot at telling other men how to avoid getting shot. The armorer, Sergeant Davies, picked up the rifle, turned it over in his hands like he was inspecting a suspicious fish at the market. Read the engraving on the stock, Robert Mitchell Sr., 1938. "This for deer or Germans?" Lieutenant James kept his voice flat. No emotion, no challenge. "Both, Sergeant." Davies laughed, loud enough that 3 other soldiers looked over from the cleaning benches. "Sir, with respect, this is a sporting rifle. Bolt action, 5-round magazine. You fire 1 shot, you gotta work this." He cycled the bolt dramatically. Clack, clack. The sound echoed in the concrete room. "Before you fire again. Meanwhile, a Kraut with a semi-auto puts 3 rounds in you." "I'm aware of the mechanics, Sergeant." "Then you're aware this is a toy. A beautiful toy, I'll grant you." "But we're going to war, sir, not deer season." Davies handed it back like he was returning a child's cap gun. "Leave the sweetheart in your tent. Carry a Garand like the other officers." The M1 Garand was the gold standard of infantry warfare in 1943. Semi-automatic marvel that could fire 8 rounds as fast as you could pull the trigger. It was rugged, reliable. It poured out firepower that kept enemy heads down. By comparison, James's Winchester was Victorian technology. Bolt action meant manual cycling after every shot. Lift handle, pull back, eject casing, push forward, chamber new round. Total time 1.5 seconds in James's hands. An eternity in combat. It held 5 rounds. Garand held 8. It was delicate, wooden stock, precision scope. 1 good drop could knock it out of alignment. In a firefight at 20 yards, a man with a Winchester was dead meat. The military logic was unassailable. Volume of fire wins battles. Precision is a peacetime luxury. Captain Morris, commanding officer of James's platoon, delivered the final verdict on December 22nd. "Mitchell, I've read your file. Illinois State Champion. Impressive. But marksmanship competitions and combat are different animals." "Yes, sir. In combat, you don't get time to adjust your scope. You don't get time to calculate wind drift. You fire fast. You fire often. You keep enemy heads down." "Understood, sir. Your little bolt-action toy." Morris gestured at the Winchester with the kind of dismissive hand wave you'd use to shoo a fly. "That belongs in a hunting lodge, not a war zone. Leave it behind. Carry a Garand. That's an order, Mitchell. The rifle stays in camp." That night, James sat on his cot, cleaning the Winchester for the 100th time. Maybe they were right. Maybe this was vanity. Sentiment. Holding on to his father's memory at the expense of military effectiveness. He thought about the factory workers he'd trained with. Good men. Following orders. Carrying standard equipment. He thought about his mother's warning. "That rifle took your father. Don't let it take you." But then he thought about the mechanics, the ballistics, the proven accuracy. The Winchester could hit targets at 600 yards that a Garand couldn't even see. If the enemy was beyond 300 yards, volume of fire meant nothing if you couldn't see what you're shooting at. Maybe the experts were optimizing for the wrong war. January 2nd, 1943. Embarkation day. James packed his duffel. Regulation equipment on top. Visible. Inspectable. At the bottom, wrapped in oilcloth and buried under spare uniforms, the Winchester. Broken down into 3 pieces. Stock. Action. Barrel. Scope wrapped separately. If anyone searched his gear thoroughly, he'd be disciplined. Maybe court-martialed for disobeying direct orders. But James had learned something from his father's death. Sometimes you have to trust your own judgment, even when everyone else says you're wrong. Especially when they say you're wrong. The 132nd Infantry Regiment relieved the Marines on December 28, 1942. The Marines looked like walking skeletons. Malaria, dysentery, combat fatigue, men who'd fought since August holding Henderson Field against wave after wave of Japanese assaults. One Marine sergeant loading onto a transport ship grabbed James's arm. His grip was weak but desperate. His eyes were the color of old dishwater. "You're heading into hell, Lieutenant. But it's not the hell you trained for. What do you mean the Japs retreated west? Dug into the banyan groves? They're not fighting divisions anymore. They're fighting differently." "How?" The sergeant's eyes were hollow, like someone had scooped out everything human and left only the husk. "You'll see. Or rather, you won't." The jungle around Point Cruz was vertical warfare. Banyan trees 90 feet tall, trunks 8 feet thick. Canopy so dense that at noon the forest floor stayed twilight dark. Visibility was measured in feet, not yards. The Japanese had adapted perfectly. Their snipers would climb before dawn, tie themselves to branches 70 to 80 feet up, sit motionless all day, completely invisible from below. One tree could hide 3 or 4 snipers. The forest had thousands of trees. Finding them was like finding specific needles in a haystack the size of Manhattan. And they only needed 1 shot. January 19th, 1943. Corporal Benjamin Davis, 22, from Mobile, Alabama, shot through the neck while filling his canteen at a creek. He'd been talking to his squad mate about his girl back home. Said he was going to marry her when he got back. Had the ring in his pocket. The bullet came from nowhere. No sound. No muzzle flash. Davis dropped into the water. Died in 20 seconds. The ring fell out of his pocket. Sank into mud. Never recovered. His squad mate never saw the shooter. January 20th. Private First Class Martinez and Private O'Neill. Shot on patrol. Both headshots. 150 yards apart. Different shooters. O'Neill had 2 kids. Martinez was 19. First combat action. The patrol returned fire blindly. Pumped 200 rounds into the canopy. Hit nothing. Wasted ammunition. Wasted time. January 21st. 3 men killed. The last one, Sergeant William Cooper, was shot, walking past a tree his squad had checked twice. The sniper had climbed into position after they passed. Waited 15 minutes. Shot Cooper in the back of the head when he walked the return route. By the time Cooper's squad realized he was down, the sniper had descended. Moved to different tree. Invisible. Lethal. Unstoppable. By January 21st, the battalion was disintegrating, not from casualties, from fear. Men refused to fill canteens alone, refused to walk patrol routes. Some soldiers claimed they could feel crosshairs on their backs, phantom sensation, but real terror. Captain Morris watched his unit die, not from artillery, not from banzai charges, from invisible ghosts who took 1 shot, 1 kill, then vanished. Standard countermeasures failed. Machine gun suppression couldn't suppress what you couldn't see. Artillery bombardment couldn't hit targets you couldn't locate. Counter-sniper teams were useless when American scopes maxed at 300 yards and Japanese were shooting from 400 to 500. The experts had no solution. January 21st, 2100 hours. Captain Morris summoned James to battalion headquarters. Morris looked like he'd aged 10 years in 3 weeks. His eyes were bloodshot. His hands shook slightly when he lit a cigarette. "Mitchell, I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer." "Yes, sir." "That toy rifle you were ordered to leave behind. Did you bring it anyway?" James hesitated. Admitting disobedience meant court-martial, loss of rank, possibly discharge. His mother's pension would disappear. "Answer the question, Lieutenant." "Yes, sir. I brought it." Morris didn't explode, didn't threaten punishment. Instead, he asked the question that would change everything. "Can it actually hit anything?" James laid out the facts. No emotion,
No bragging, just physics. Illinois state champion, 1939. 1,000-yard competition. I can put 5 rounds in a 4-inch circle at 300 yards. I can shoot 6-inch groups at 600 yards using iron sights alone. With the Lyman scope, I can see targets clearly at 500 to 600 yards. Morris listened, calculator running in his head, measuring desperation against military regulation. The Japanese snipers are estimated at 400 to 500 yards out. Your scope can see that far. Yes, sir. 2.5 power magnification. Not much, but enough. And you can hit targets at that range. I've done it thousands of times, sir. Deer don't stand still. Neither will they. Morris made his decision. The kind of decision that gets you promoted or court-martialed, depending on how it turns out. You have until 0600 tomorrow to prove it.
If you can kill even one of these ghosts, I'll ignore the fact that you disobeyed my direct order. If you can't... He didn't finish. Didn't need to. Understood, sir. One more thing, Mitchell. Sir, if you die out there with that toy rifle, I'm putting in your file that you disobeyed orders. Your family won't get your pension. Yes, sir. James returned to his tent, pulled the Winchester from his duffel, assembled it by muscle memory in darkness. Stock, action, barrel, scope mount. He'd done this 1,000 times, but tonight felt different. Tomorrow he'd use his father's rifle to kill human beings, not deer, not targets, men. James kept a small notebook, waterproof canvas cover, same one his father had used for hunting logs. He wrote that night by candlelight, January 21st, 1943, "Tomorrow I hunt men. Dad taught me to respect every animal I killed, never celebrate the death, honor the sacrifice. How do I respect humans I'm ordered to kill? They're soldiers following orders."
Like me. They're someone's sons. Like me. They'd kill me if they saw me first. I will kill them before they kill my men. That is the job. I try to remember. The rifle is a tool. The war is the crime. I'm just the instrument. But instruments have consciences too. If I survive this, I don't know if I'll ever shoot again. If I don't survive, someone tell Mom. The rifle didn't take me. War did. James stripped the Winchester completely. Cosmoline, thick preservative from the ocean voyage, still clung to internal parts. He'd cleaned it twice already, but tonight he cleaned it again. Ritual, prayer, meditation, same way his father had taught him. Cloth patches soaked in oil, run through barrel until patches came out clean. No residue, no carbon, perfect. Each stroke through the bore he thought about trajectory, bullet drop, wind deflection. Each wipe of the action he thought about his father, the unanswered questions, the mystery death. If you're watching Dad guide my hand tomorrow... James had no special sniper ammunition, just standard .30 caliber ball ammo. Same cartridges the machine gunners burned through by the belt. 150 grain bullets. 2 700 feet per second muzzle velocity. At 500 yards, the bullet would drop approximately 64 inches. Wind drift in a 10-mile-per-hour crosswind would push it 18 inches. Time of flight, 0.7 of a second. James had calculated these numbers 1,000 times on civilian ranges, but those were paper targets. These would be men. He loaded 5 rounds into the internal magazine, loaded 60 more into stripper clips, 65 rounds total. If he needed more than that, he was probably already dead. Winchester Model 70, 9 pounds. Lyman Alaskan scope, 12 ounces. Total 9¾ pounds. Most snipers complained about rifle weight. Said it caused fatigue. James welcomed it. Weight meant stability. When the firing pin struck primer, heavier rifle absorbed recoil. Barrel didn't jump off target. His father had taught him light rifles are for show, heavy rifles are for hitting. James checked the Lyman scope one final time, tightened mounting screws, made sure glass was clean. 2.5 power magnification was pathetic by modern standards. German snipers had 4 power, 6 power, even 10 power scopes. But James had learned something the Germans hadn't. Magnification is worthless if you can't see through jungle foliage. Lower magnification equals wider field of view, equals easier to spot movement. The Japanese snipers in the trees weren't precision targets. They were movement detection problems. James's scope was perfect for that. He tried to sleep. Failed. At 0300 he gave up, sat on his cot, loaded the Winchester, cycled the action to verify smooth function. Dry fired 3 times on empty chamber to check trigger pull. 3.5 pounds. Glass smooth break. Perfect. At 0530, he grabbed a canteen, checked his knife, walked toward the ruined bunker west of Point Cruz. The sky was still dark. Artillery thumped in the distance. Birds hadn't started screaming yet. James settled into the bunker, rested the rifle's forestock on broken concrete, and began to wait. The sun rose at 0617. By 0917, James had killed 2 Japanese snipers. By 1200, he'd killed 5. By January 24th, at 10:13 hours, he'd killed all 11. But success has consequences. And right now, in a water-filled crater with 1 bullet left, James is learning exactly what those consequences are. The voices are closer now, 20 yards, maybe less. James tightens his grip on the Winchester. 1 bullet, 6 men. Impossible odds. But impossible is just another word for not yet done. But before we see how James survives that crater, we need to understand who's hunting him. Because 4 days of killing doesn't go unnoticed. January 23rd, 1943. Japanese command post. 1400 hours.
Colonel Yamamoto spread aerial reconnaissance photos across the wooden table. 8 red circles marked body recovery locations. 8 of his best snipers. Dead in 72 hours. The room smelled of cigarette smoke and desperation. Yamamoto looked across the table at the man the Germans had sent. Hauptmann Klaus Richter, age 35, veteran of the Eastern Front, graduate of German sniper school class of 1940, personally trained 47 snipers, 32 still alive, 187 confirmed kills across Poland, France, and Russia. The Germans called him Totenvogel, Deathbird. The Japanese called him Kiyoshi. Instructor. 8 men, Yamamoto said. Professional snipers. All dead. Same sector. 72-hour period. Richter studied the photos. His eyes were the color of frozen Baltic sea water. He moved with the economy of a man who understood that wasted motion equals wasted life. May I see the recovered weapons? Yamamoto gestured. An orderly brought 4 Arisaka sniper rifles. Richter examined each scope. Calculated shot angles based on where bodies fell. His fingers traced invisible trajectories through the air. Your men were shot from the west, 400 to 600 meters, all headshots or center mass. Yes, single shooter, not a team. Yamamoto frowned. How can you tell shot spacing? If multiple shooters, you'd see simultaneous kills or rapid succession. These are methodical. 1 shot. Wait, next target. Professional patients. The Americans don't have snipers capable of this range. Richter smiled. Not friendly. Clinical. The smile of a surgeon discussing a particularly interesting tumor. Apparently they do now. May I see the bodies? The medical tent smelled of death and formaldehyde. 8 covered corpses on stretchers. Richter pulled back sheets one by one. Examined wound patterns. Entry wounds. Bullet trajectories. He asked for recovered bullets. 3 were brought. Standard .30 caliber. American military ball ammunition. Nothing special. But the shot placement. This man Richter pointed at Corporal Tanaka's body was shot while descending a tree. Moving target. 60-meter vertical drop. Shooter compensated for downward motion. Extremely difficult. This man Sergeant Ito was shot through a gap in foliage. 8-centimeter window. At 500 meters. In moving air. That's not luck. He stood back. Arms crossed. Mind calculating. Colonel, you don't have a sniper problem. You have a master problem. Whoever this American is, he's not standard military. This is civilian skill. Competition shooter or professional hunter. Someone who's been shooting since childhood. Yamamoto's jaw tightened. Can you kill him? Richter's smile widened. I've killed 187 men. Many of them were professionals. This American is good, but I am better. How can you be certain? Because I'm still alive, Colonel, and 47 men I've killed were also masters. Richter requested high ground observation post, 8x60 Zeiss scope, German import, 2 spotter teams. Permission to operate independently. I don't hunt like the Japanese. Your men sit in trees, static, predictable. That's why they die. How do you hunt? I become the environment. I don't hide in the jungle. I become part of the jungle. The American won't see me until I want him to. Yamamoto approved everything. Richter spent January 23rd afternoon scouting. He found the bunker where James had operated, found brass casings, .30 caliber, American, measured sight lines with a surveyor's precision. Clever. Good position. West-facing. Morning sun behind him. Targets backlit. He marked 3 alternate positions James might relocate to. Studied the terrain with the attention most men reserve for love letters or financial statements. Then he chose his own position. 800 meters southeast. High ridge. Perfect view of all 3 of James's likely spots. As sun set. January 23rd, Richter settled into his hide, his spotter beside him. Tomorrow we will see if this American is as good as his shots suggest. Now here's what makes this next part fascinating. For 4 days, James has been hunting Japanese snipers who are good but not exceptional, solid professionals, but not masters. Richter is different. He's killed 187 men. He's survived the Eastern Front where German snipers had 70% casualty rates. He's trained under Matthias Hetzenauer, one of the deadliest snipers in history. This is like watching a regional chess champion suddenly play against a grandmaster. James doesn't know Richter exists, but Richter knows exactly where James will be. January 22nd, 1943, 1200 hours. By noon, James had killed 5 Japanese snipers. The news spread through 132nd Infantry like electricity. Men who'd spent 6 weeks mocking his mail-order sweetheart stopped laughing. They started asking, "Can we watch you work?" James refused. Spectators drew attention. Attention drew fire. Captain Morris visited the bunker at 12:10 hours. "Mitchell, higher command wants confirmation. Did you really kill 5 men this morning?" "Yes, sir. 2 initially. Then 3 more as enemy repositioned. With that toy rifle. With this precision instrument, sir." Morris stared at the Winchester. Covered in jungle grime. Scope scratched but functional. "I owe you an apology, Lieutenant." "No, sir. You made the correct call based on available information. My rifle is an anomaly." "Can you keep doing this?" James thought about the math. 11 snipers estimated total. He'd killed 5. That left 6. "Yes, sir. But the easy part is over." "What do you mean?" "They know I'm here now. They'll adapt." James was right. After the 5th kill, the jungle went silent. No movement in trees, no targets. Just empty canopy and screaming birds. The Japanese had realized something. Americans suddenly had a capability they'd lacked yesterday. Somewhere in that sector, an American sniper could kill at 500+ yards, with precision, repeatedly. Standard Japanese sniper doctrine didn't account for this, so they changed tactics. Japanese snipers stopped moving during daylight hours. They'd climb into position during darkness, remain motionless all day, descend only after sunset. James spent January 22nd afternoon staring at empty trees. By 1700 hours, he'd seen nothing. No targets, no movement. He realized something that made his stomach drop. "I'm no longer shooting targets. I'm in a chess match." January 23rd, 0630 hours. Heavy tropical rainstorm. Visibility dropped below 100 yards. World turned grey. Rain hammered metal roofs like artillery. Water ran in sheets. James sat in bunker shivering, protected his scope from moisture. Waited. Standard doctrine said rain equals no sniping. Can't see targets. Can't adjust for wind and rain drift. But James realized something. If he couldn't see enemy thought, they were safe. Rain broke at 0815. By 0912, James had spotted sniper number 6, 290 yards out, further than previous kills. Japanese sniper testing American effective range. If James couldn't hit at 290, enemy could operate safely beyond that distance. The sniper was partially concealed by palm fronds, only shoulders visible. Small target. James adjusted for distance. Bullet drop at 290 yards, approximately 30 inches. Wet air affects ballistics. Denser air equals more drag. Wind minimal after storm. He aimed 32 inches high to compensate for drop. Exhale. Pause. Squeeze. The Winchester cracked. Through scope, target collapsed. Fell backward out of tree. James cycled bolt immediately. Scanned for secondary threats. None visible. 6 down. 5 to go. 0957 hours. James heard it before he saw it. Whistling. High-pitched. Growing louder. Mortar. First shell hit 40 yards short of bunker. Explosion through mud and shrapnel skyward. James's training kicked in. They're ranging. Second shell. 20 yards short. They've got my position. Third shell would hit bunker. James grabbed Winchester. Sprinted out back entrance. Dove into muddy shell crater 15 yards away. The third salvo hit exactly where he'd been sitting. Bunker roof disintegrated. Concrete and logs became shrapnel cloud. Dust and death mixed in equal measure. If James had hesitated 5 seconds to admire his 6th kill, he'd be unrecognizable meat. He lay in crater, heart hammering, ears ringing. They triangulated me from muzzle flash and sound. The Japanese had adapted again. Can't counter-snipe use artillery. James spent next 4 hours relocating, never staying in one position more than 30 minutes. Fallen tree, 120 yards north. Killed 7th sniper from there. 1423 hours. Immediately relocated to rock cluster 70 yards east. Killed 8th sniper from there.
15:30 hours. Relocated again to drainage ditch. Waited.
By 1700 hours, James had fired 12 rounds, killed 8 men. When Captain Morris recalled him, James's hands were shaking, not from fear, from exhaustion. 8 kills in one day, each kill requiring 100% focus, no margin for error. That night, James tried to sleep. Failed. The math kept running. 11 snipers total, 8 dead, 3 remaining. The survivors are the best. They've watched their comrades die. They know I'm here. They know what I look like. They know the sound of my rifle. He wrote in his journal by candlelight. January 23rd, 1943. 8 men killed today. I should feel proud. I feel nothing. Not satisfaction. Not guilt. Just empty. Each time I pull the trigger, I think, that man had a name, a family, a life before this war. But if I don't kill him, he kills my men. That is the equation. Necessary doesn't mean good. January 24th, 0700 hours. Richter's position. Hauptmann. Richter watched from 800 meters away as James settled into rock cluster at dawn.
Through his 8x60 Zeiss scope, Richter observed every detail. James's methodical scanning pattern, grid by grid, never rushing, how he rested rifle, always on solid surface, never free hand, his breathing discipline, timed to wind lulls, his trigger discipline, slow squeeze, never jerk. Richter spoke quietly to his spotter. This American is self-taught, you can tell from technique, no formal military training, but exceptional natural skill. How do you know self-taught military snipers learn doctrine first? This man learned by necessity. Look how he braces rifle. That's hunter technique, not military. Richter smiled. Good. Military doctrine makes men predictable. This man is unpredictable. Richter had spent night preparing. He'd convinced Private Nakamura to act as bait. Young sniper, inexperienced, eager to prove himself. Richter positioned Nakamura in palm tree 190 yards from James's rocks. Position deliberately obvious. Too low. Only 40 feet up. Too exposed.
The American will see you immediately, and then he shoots me no, because you're bait. He'll realize trap. He'll look for real threat. Richter positioned himself 80 yards northwest, 91 feet up in massive banyan. Perfect concealment. Rifle trained on where James had been yesterday. When American shoots you, I see muzzle flash. I kill him before he can cycle bolt. Nakamura looked terrified. Richter's voice went cold. You volunteered for this. If you run, I shoot you myself. Understand high. 817 hours. James spotted Nakamura in palm tree. Too obvious. Too exposed. Wrong height. James's finger moved to trigger, then stopped. This is bait. Every instinct screamed. This is too easy. Survivors don't expose themselves like this. James lowered rifle, began scanning trees around the bait. From his hide, Richter watched James not take the shot. Interesting. He's smarter than I expected. What do? We wait. Either he shoots bait, and I kill him, or he finds me and we have real duel. Richter watched James scan, methodically, grid by grid. James's scope passed over Richter's position twice. Didn't see him. Richter was buried too deep in foliage, motionless, breathing controlled. It took James 11 minutes. 8 hours. He spotted it. Not a man. A shape. 80 yards northwest. 91 feet up. Massive banyan. Something geometric. Straight line. Rifle barrel. James kept his scope on the shape. Watched for movement. There. Barely perceptible. Richter shifted his head 2 inches. Found you. But now James had a problem. If he shot the bait, muzzle flash would reveal position to real sniper. If he shot real sniper first, bait would see him and possibly call artillery. James made his decision. Use their trap against them. He aimed at Nakamura in palm tree. Fired. Nakamura fell. James immediately cycled bolt while swinging rifle toward Richter's position. Richter saw muzzle flash from James's position.
Heard Nakamura's death cry. Began to squeeze trigger on James's last known position. Then his world shifted. James wasn't where he'd been. Richter's brain screamed. He moved while cycling. Impossible speed. Then Richter felt it. Impact. 30 caliber round struck Richter's left shoulder. Not center mass, not kill shot, but devastating. Richter's Mauser rifle fell from hands, tumbled 91 feet, crashed to jungle floor. Richter tied to tree couldn't fall, but he couldn't shoot either. Through pain, through shock, one thought. He's better than me. Let me put this in perspective.
Richter had killed 187 men over 3 years. He'd survived the Eastern Front where German snipers had 70% casualty rates. He was top of his class at German sniper school. He'd trained 47 snipers, 32 still alive. And James, a self-taught civilian with hunting rifle, just outdueled him. Not because James had better equipment. Richter's Zeiss scope cost 3 times more. Not because James had better training. Richter had years of professional military instruction, because James had 10,000 hours of childhood practice and desperation born from necessity. That combination beats credentials every single time. James watched through scope as Richter hung in tree, wounded, disarmed, could let him bleed out, could call it done. But James had learned from hunting, never let an animal suffer. He aimed again. Center mass. Richter's chest. Fired. Richter's body went slack. The 9th kill. James didn't know he'd just killed German advisor. He thought it was another Japanese sniper. Only decades later, when Japanese records were declassified, would historians discover the truth. The American Ghost had eliminated Hauptmann Klaus Richter, one of Germany's elite snipers. James didn't wait to admire work, grabbed rifle, ran east along rock line, threw himself into drainage ditch. 6 seconds later, machine gun fire shredded rocks he'd just vacated. Stone fragments exploded. If he'd hesitated for 5 count, he'd be cut in half. They're coordinating now. Radio communication. Faster response. James crawled 100 yards east, found shell crater filled with rainwater, slid in, water up to chest, only cover available. Rested Winchester on crater rim. 10 kills completed, 1 remaining. He scanned for an hour, saw nothing. 09:47 hours. James realized his mistake. I've been looking up. Movement. 60 yards south, ground level, shape moving through ferns, low, fast. The 11th sniper had abandoned vertical war, hunting from ground, like tiger in tall grass. James watched through scope. Sniper reached rocks where James had been, set up, aimed toward drainage ditch, back exposed, 38 yards away. Too easy. Best of them wouldn't expose back. James widened scan. There. 70 yards northwest. Second soldier behind fallen tree. Hunter-killer team. Man in rocks equals flush. Man behind tree equals hammer. Winchester too slow for 2-target engagement. If James shot first, man's second saw flash and killed him while cycling bolt. Math was fatal. James lowered into water, became part of swamp, held Winchester vertically, barrel dry, waited. 10:13 hours. Man in rocks stood, signaled partner. Both assumed James had fled east. Began moving, walking parallel, sweeping area. Walked past James's crater. Backs exposed. James rose from water, mud streaming. Creature from lagoon. Shouldered Winchester, aimed at closer man. 42 yards. Fired. First man dropped. Cycled bolt. Clack, clack. Swung to second man. Second soldier turning. Rifle raising. Eyes locking onto James. Race. Bolt action versus semi-auto reaction. James fired. Second soldier collapsed. 11 shots. 11 snipers dead. Echo of shot fading. Then new sound. Voices. Lots of them. From tree line. Japanese infantry patrol. Coming to investigate bodies less than 50 yards away. James fired his last 3 rounds at the advancing patrol. 3 soldiers fell. Bought him seconds. He fumbled with cold fingers. Left breast pocket. 1 stripper clip, protected from water. Loaded 5 rounds into magazine. Chambered 1. Looked at the other 4 cartridges in his palm. Ejected them. Lightened the rifle. 1 bullet. That's all he needs. And that's how James Mitchell ends up floating in muddy water with 1 bullet left, about to learn that killing ghosts is the easy part. Surviving their friends is something else entirely. James drops back into the water. The Winchester is held vertically against his chest. 1 bullet in the chamber. The only thing between him and a Japanese grave. He can hear them now. Closer. Boots sucking mud. 25 yards. Equipment rattling. Voices calling out in Japanese. Loud. Urgent. Angry. These aren't the ghosts he's been hunting for 4 days. This is a recovery team sent to find out why their best marksman stopped reporting in. The voices grow louder. James counts at least 6 distinct tones. Maybe more. They're moving toward the bodies of the 2 snipers he just killed. He hears them stop at the first body, 42 yards away. The tone of conversation shifts from confusion to anger. They found the corpse. Then they move to the second body. More shouting. Orders barked. Boots in mud. And then the sound changes direction. They're not moving back to the tree line. They're moving toward him. James realizes with sick certainty that he made a rookie mistake. He's been so careful about noise and movement, but he forgot the ground. He left boot prints in the soft mud, leading from the rocks, directly to this crater. He drew them a map, right to his hiding spot. The voices are closing in.
30 yards, 25 yards. James grips the wet wood of the rifle stock. He has 1 round in the magazine. There are at least 6 men coming. The math is fatal. A bolt-action rifle is a precision instrument, not a street sweeper.
Against a squad of infantry armed with semi-automatics and bayonets, he's dead. He considers staying hidden, hoping they'll glance at the crater and move on. But the tracks don't lie. They know he's here. He tightens his grip on the trigger guard. The water laps against his lower lip. At 10:31 hours, a Japanese soldier appears at the rim of the crater. He's looking straight down, eyes scanning the muddy water. He stops. Eyes lock onto James's face floating on the surface. For a split second, there's no sound, just 2 men staring at each other across 10 feet of distance. The soldier opens his mouth to shout. James doesn't wait. Time slows, the kind of slow that happens when death is half a second away. He raises the Winchester out of the water cascading off the stock in slow-motion rivulets. Every drop takes a year to fall. The Japanese soldier's mouth is forming the first syllable of his shout. Alarm. Warning. Death sentence. James fires from the hip. He doesn't aim through the scope. No time. This is instinct shooting, point shooting, the kind of muscle memory that comes from 10,000 hours on ranges in Illinois. The heavy rifle roars. Muzzle blast kicks up spray of water. The bullet hits the soldier in the chest at point-blank range. The impact throws him backward like he's been hit by a sledgehammer. He disappears from the rim. James doesn't hesitate. He works the bolt while the rifle is still half submerged. The action feels gritty, mud grinding against the polished steel, but it cycles. He shoves the bolt forward. Chambering his second round, he stands up, water streaming off his uniform. 2 more soldiers appear at the rim, drawn by the gunshot. They're raising their Arisaka rifles. James fires at the one on the left. The man drops. James rips the bolt back. Clack. Shoves it forward. Clack. Fires at the one on the right. The third man falls. 3 shots in 4 seconds. Miracle of muscle memory. The kind of shooting you learn on a competition range, not in boot camp. But the magazine is now empty. 0 rounds. James can hear shouting from the tree line. The rest of the patrol is charging. He scrambles up the north side of the crater, boots slipping on wet clay. He hauls himself over the lip and sprints into the undergrowth. Behind him, the jungle explodes with rifle fire. Bullets snap through the air, cutting through vines, thumping into trees around him. They're not aiming, they're suppressing, filling the air with lead to pin him down so they can flank him. James runs 20 yards and dives behind the thick trunk of a fallen mahogany tree. He presses his face into the dirt as bullets chew up the wood above his head. Splinters rain down on his helmet. He takes a breath and assesses the situation. He's pinned, he's outnumbered, and he's out of ammunition. He risks a look over the top of the log. Through the undergrowth he sees movement. 2 Japanese soldiers advancing toward the crater he just left, moving in a crouch, rifles up. They're 50 yards out. They think he's still in the water. James raises the Winchester. The scope is wet, the lens blurred with droplets, but he can see center of mass. He aims at the lead soldier. He squeezes the trigger. Click. Empty. The sound of a firing pin striking nothing is the loneliest sound in war. James's blood turns to ice water. He hears voices coming from his left and his right. The Japanese commander isn't stupid. He split his force. While 2 men advanced up the middle, the others circled wide. They're flanking him. In 30 seconds, they'll be behind him, and it will be over. James realizes he can't win this fight. You can't hold off a flanking maneuver with an empty rifle. He has to break contact. He doesn't crawl this time. He runs. He explodes from behind the log and sprints north, heading deeper into the jungle, away from his own lines. But away from the closing trap. He runs with desperation that burns in his lungs. Vines grab at his ankles like tripwires. Thorny branches whip across his face, opening cuts on his cheeks that he doesn't even feel. Behind him, the Japanese realize he's moving. The volume of fire increases. Bullets crack past his ears with that terrifying supersonic snap that tells you it missed by inches. 1 round strikes a tree next to his head, spraying bark into his eyes. He keeps running. He runs for 90 seconds, a dead sprint through terrain that would be difficult to walk through. His heart is beating so fast his vision is tunneling. He sees another shell crater ahead, this one dry. He throws himself into it, sliding down the dirt wall and landing in a heap at the bottom. He rolls onto his back, gasping for air, clutching the empty Winchester across his chest. He holds his breath, listening. The jungle is noisy with the sounds of his own panic, but behind him the voices are fading. The Japanese haven't pursued him at a sprint. They're regrouping, checking their dead. They've lost 8 men in less than 5 minutes to a single American. They're hesitant to chase a ghost into the deep jungle. James lies there for 10 minutes, waiting for his heart rate to drop below 200 beats per minute. He checks the rifle. It's a mess. Stock caked in mud, water dripping from barrel channel, Action fouled with grit. He opens the bolt and checks the chamber. Empty. He pats his webbing pouches, searching for a forgotten stripper clip. Nothing. They're all back at the water-filled crater, likely sinking into the mud or in the hands of a Japanese soldier. He's alone behind enemy lines with an empty rifle. At 10:47 hours, James begins to move again. He doesn't run. Running makes noise. Running leaves obvious tracks. He moves with the slow, deliberate pace of a hunter. He moves northeast, circling back toward the American perimeter, but giving the ambush site a wide berth. Every step is calculated. He watches the ground for dry spots to avoid leaving footprints. He watches the birds to see if they're startled by movement ahead. The jungle has returned to its ominous quiet. The adrenaline has worn off, replaced by crushing exhaustion. His uniform is heavy with water and mud. His boots feel like lead weights, but he keeps moving. It takes him 25 minutes to cover the distance. At 11:13 hours, he sees the familiar shape of American concertina wire through the trees. A Marine sentry challenges him from a foxhole, weapon raised. James identifies himself. His voice is raspy and dry. The sentry lowers his rifle and waves him through. Looking at the mud-caked officer with a mixture of confusion and relief, James stumbles into the perimeter. He doesn't stop for food, doesn't stop for dry clothes. He walks straight to the battalion headquarters tent. Captain Morris is waiting. He looks up as James enters. The captain sees the mud, the blood on James's face, the battered Winchester in his hand. He doesn't ask if James is okay. He asks for the report. James leans the rifle against the tent pole and sits down heavily on a crate. He gives the numbers in a flat, monotone voice. 11 snipers killed over 4 days, January 22nd through 24th. 12 rounds fired against the snipers, resulting in 11 hits and 1 miss at 320 yards due to wind miscalculation. Then firefight with infantry patrol, 8 more enemy killed in action, 13 rounds fired, total casualties 19. Morris stares at him. The number is higher than anyone expected. Ammunition status. James taps his empty magazine. 0 rounds remaining, sir. Morris looks at the rifle. It's unrecognizable under the layers of jungle filth. Does it still work? James nods. Needs cleaning. Mud in the action, water in the barrel. But it worked. Morris sits back, processing the information. An entire Japanese sniper detachment, plus an infantry squad, wiped out by one man with a hunting rifle. Go get some sleep, Mitchell. The sector is clear. The Japanese are evacuating. The job is done. James walks back to his tent. He doesn't feel like a hero. He feels like a mechanic who just finished a very long, very dirty shift. He sits on his cot and pulls the bolt out of the Winchester. He spends the next 2 hours cleaning it. He uses patches and oil, scrubbing away the mud and the carbon, removing the evidence of the slaughter. He cleans the lens of the Lyman Alaskan scope until it's crystal clear again. He strips the magazine spring and wipes it down. When he's finished, he reassembles the rifle and cycles the action. It's smooth again. He loads 5 fresh rounds of ball ammunition into the magazine, just in case. Now here's what's remarkable. James didn't celebrate, didn't brag, didn't even mention it in letters home to his mother. Years later, historians would ask him why. His answer: 19 men died. They were someone's sons. Celebrating that felt wrong. I did what was necessary. Necessary doesn't mean proud. This is the difference between veterans and civilians. Veterans understand. Killing isn't glory. It's just the worst possible solution to an impossible problem. That afternoon, a runner came from regimental headquarters. Colonel Ferry wanted to see him. James assumed he was in trouble. He'd operated alone, violated safety protocols, nearly got himself killed. He walked to the colonel's tent expecting a reprimand. Instead, he found a different kind of reception. Colonel Ferry and Captain Morris were there. The colonel didn't care about the protocols, he cared about the results. He had one question for the 27-year-old lieutenant. Can you teach other men to do what you just did? James looked at the officers. He thought about the men he'd seen dying on the patrols, shot by invisible enemies because they didn't know how to look. Didn't know how to wait, didn't have the tools to fight back. I can try, sir, but I need the right men. Expert marksmen, not raw recruits, and I need the right equipment. The colonel nodded. The regiment has found 14 Springfield rifles equipped with unearthed scopes, actual sniper rifles left behind by the Marines, and we have 40 men who are qualified experts. I want you to build a sniper section. I want you to turn the tables. James accepted the mission, but he had one condition. He pointed to the battered rifle slung over his shoulder. The colonel raised an eyebrow. I'll train the men on the Springfield, sir, but I'm keeping the Winchester. The colonel smiled and approved the request. The toy had just earned its tenure. The sniper school that James established on Guadalcanal was not a classroom with chalkboards and textbooks. It was a mud pit located 2 miles east of Henderson Field, where the air was thick with humidity and the smell of cordite. 40 men reported for duty, all of them officially designated as expert marksmen by the Marine Corps. On paper, they were the best shots in the regiment, capable of hitting bullseyes at 500 yards with iron sights. But James knew that hitting a paper target on a manicured range was useless in the chaos of the jungle. He stripped them of their arrogance and started from zero. He taught them that in the field there are no bench rests. He taught them to brace their heavy Springfield rifles against rotting logs, termite mounds, and the shoulders of their spotters. He taught them the deadly geometry of wind and elevation in a rainforest where the canopy could hide a bullet's flight path. He wasn't just teaching them to shoot, he was teaching them to hunt. By January 30th, 32 of the 40 men could consistently hit man-sized targets at 300 yards while hiding in the undergrowth. James organized them into 16 two-man teams, mirroring the Japanese tactics he had just dismantled: shooter and spotter, hunter and killer. On February the 1st, the final exam began. It wasn't a simulation. James took 4 teams into the sector west of the Matnikau River to clear out Japanese stragglers. He paired himself with a corporal named Hayes and set up on a high ridge overlooking a supply trail. When a Japanese soldier appeared at 0720 hours, Hayes spotted him and James dropped him. Next 6 hours, multiple engagements, precision work. By the time the sun went down, the sniper section had killed 23 Japanese soldiers. The American casualties were 0. The toy rifle had spawned a legacy. The officers who had laughed at James's scope were now begging for his teams to cover their patrols. The vindication was absolute. But the war didn't stop for a victory lap. On February the 7th, James was operating near the Tanabari River when his luck finally ran dry. A Japanese rifleman hidden in the brush put a bullet into James's left shoulder. The impact spun him around and dropped him into the mud. It was a serious wound, missing the bone but tearing through the muscle. Corporal Hayes dragged him to cover, saving his life. James was evacuated to a field hospital, his Guadalcanal campaign over. But behind him, he left a statistic that defied the logic of modern infantry warfare. In 12 days of operation, his sniper section had achieved 74 confirmed kills with 0 friendly losses. The mail-order sweetheart had proven that a single precision rifle was worth a platoon of machine guns in the right terrain. James recovered, but he didn't go home. He volunteered for a new classified mission in Burma with a unit that would become legendary: Merrill's Marauders. This was the deep end of the pool, long-range penetration behind enemy lines, marching hundreds of miles through mountains and jungles that the Japanese considered impassable. James realized that the Winchester Model 70, as perfect as it was, needed to evolve. The heavy wooden stock and the steel scope were too burdensome for a man carrying 60 pounds of gear over a mountain range, so he modified it again. He replaced the Lyman Alaskan scope with a lighter Weaver 330 model. He swapped the beautiful walnut stock for a lightweight synthetic version. He shaved ounces to save energy, turning his hunting rifle into a specialized tool of war. In Burma, the engagements were fewer, but the stakes were higher. James used the rifle only 3 times during the 3-month death march to Myitkyina. One shot at 412 yards against an officer directing troops at a river crossing. Another at 380 yards against a machine gun nest. The third at 290 yards to silence a sniper pinning down his patrol. 3 shots, 3 kills. He never fired a second round. He knew that the unique crack of the Winchester was a dinner bell for every Japanese mortar team in the valley. He shot, and he moved. When the war finally ended, James Robert Mitchell didn't stay in the military-industrial complex. He was discharged in January 1947 as a lieutenant colonel with 2 Bronze Stars. He took a sharp left turn into civilian life. Using the GI Bill, he returned to Rockford, Illinois. He took his old job back at the local machine shop, operating lathes, the same work he'd done before the war. He married Sarah Mitchell in June 1947, raised 4 children. He never discussed the war. Neighbors knew he'd been a soldier. Few knew he'd been a sniper. None knew about the Winchester, or the 19 confirmed kills, or the Japanese calling him Yurei. But Sarah noticed something. James slept poorly. He'd wake suddenly, drenched in sweat, staring at the ceiling. She'd ask the war. He'd nod, never elaborate. The nightmares were specific. The water crater, mud and blood, the sound of brass casings ejecting, that metallic ping that haunted quiet moments. The faces he'd seen through the scope in the half-second before pulling the trigger. In 1952, James saw a psychologist. diagnosed with combat fatigue, what we now call PTSD. The psychologist asked, "Do you regret killing those men?" James's answer was carefully constructed. "I regret that it was necessary. I don't regret that I was capable. If I hadn't killed them, they'd have killed my men. That was the equation. But equations have human costs. I paid mine in nightmares." In 1954, James sat down and wrote a book, Shots Fired in Anger, a soldier's view of small arms combat in World War II. It wasn't a memoir filled with bravado. It was a technical, cold and precise analysis of ballistics, jungle tactics, and the equipment of war. It became an underground Bible for military historians and firearms enthusiasts, a manual written by a man who had tested every theory in blood. The Winchester and James's wartime record remained classified until 1979. 34 years of silence.
When the army finally declassified the reports, historians were stunned. 19 confirmed kills, 4 days of intense combat. With a civilian hunting rifle and a scope his dead father had mounted in 1938. James was 76 when the story became public. A local newspaper interviewed him for anniversary coverage. His response: "I was a soldier doing my job with the tools available. Lots of men did extraordinary things in that war. I just happened to be good with a rifle and lucky enough to survive. The real heroes are the ones who didn't come home." When James returned to Rockford in June 1945, his mother Eleanor was waiting on the same porch where she'd said goodbye 4 years earlier. She was 54, but looked 70. The war years had not been kind. She saw the Winchester slung over his shoulder, same rifle that killed her husband. James expected anger, condemnation. "I told you so." Instead, she hugged him, tight, silent, for a full minute. Later, over coffee at the kitchen table, she asked, "Did it save you?" James nodded. "Yes, Ma'am, it did. Then your father would be proud." They never spoke about Robert Sr.'s death again. The mystery remained. Accident or intentional? They would never know. But James realized something in that moment. Some questions don't have answers. Some mysteries don't need solving. His father was dead. The rifle remained. And that rifle had kept James alive through 4 years of war. The Winchester didn't curse them. It saved him. And through him it saved 73 other American soldiers trained in his sniper section. That was enough. In 2008, James was 92 years old, final year of his life. He visited the National Firearms Museum in Fairfax, Virginia, before donating the Winchester. He stood before an empty glass case, waiting for his rifle. A curator watched as James touched the Winchester one last time. He ran his fingers over the scratched stock. Same wood his father had shaped 70 years earlier. He looked through the Lyman scope. Still functional after all these years. The curator asked, "Do you regret any of it?" Long pause. James's final words on record. "People ask if I'm proud of what this rifle did. I'm not proud, but I'm not ashamed either. It saved lives by taking lives. That's all war is. Terrible math. 19 men died by my hand. They were someone's sons. They were following orders. Like me. I killed them because it was necessary. Necessary to protect my men. Necessary to end the war faster. But necessary doesn't mean glorious. I carried this rifle for my father, to understand his death, to master what I feared. In the end, it saved my life. Cost 19 others. That exchange wasn't fair. War isn't fair. I just wanted people to know the men who fought weren't heroes seeking glory. We were ordinary people forced to do extraordinary violence, and we lived with that burden every day after. This rifle is proof that American ingenuity can overcome any obstacle, but it's also a reminder of the cost. Every scratch on this stock represents blood. I want people to remember both things. James Robert Mitchell died in 2009, age 93. The Winchester Model 70 was donated to the National Firearms Museum in Fairfax, Virginia. It sits in a glass case, surrounded by more famous weapons, Thompsons, Garands, grease guns. It looks unassuming. Scratched stock, simple scope. Looks like a deer rifle from grandfather's closet. But it's not a deer rifle. If you visit the museum today, you might miss it. Display case 47B. Small placard reads, Winchester Model 70-30 caliber Springfield, used by 2nd Lieutenant James R. Mitchell, Guadalcanal Campaign, January 1943. 19 confirmed enemy killed in action. Lyman Alaskan 2.5 power scope mounted 1938. Donated 2009. Visitors walk past it every day. Glance at the placard without realizing they're looking at one of the deadliest instruments of the Second World War.
They don't know about the father's mysterious death, about the 18-year-old boy's obsession, about the toy rifle mockery, about the water crater with one bullet. They see wood and steel. They don't see the 19 lives that ended, or the hundreds of lives saved. Imagine if James had obeyed orders, left the Winchester at Camp Forest, carried a Garand like everyone else. January 22nd, 1943. Japanese snipers continue operations, kill 3 to 4 Americans daily. February the 1st. Planned American offensive delayed. Casualties projected at 200 plus. March. Japanese evacuate successfully. Regroup on New Georgia. War in Pacific drags on 2 to 3 more months. Estimated additional casualties 5,000 to 10,000 Allied soldiers. But James did disobey. Winchester did kill 19 men. Sniper school did train 32 more sharpshooters. Offensive succeeded.
Japanese evacuated under fire. War shortened. Sometimes one man changes everything, not because he's special, because he refuses to accept that can't be done, means it shouldn't be tried. Today, James's techniques are taught at United States Army Sniper School at Fort Moore, at Marine Corps Scout Sniper School, at SEAL Sniper Training. They call it Mitchell's Patience Protocol. Grid by grid scanning, never rushing, waiting for movement. They call it Mitchell's Relocation Doctrine. Never fire more than 2 shots from same position. Prevents counterfire. They call it Mitchell's Equipment Philosophy. Mission-specific beats general purpose. Sometimes the inferior weapon is superior for specific environment. The United States military spent 60 years teaching volume of fire wins. James proved precision wins if you can't see the target. Both are true. Context dependent. We tell this story because history is written about generals and maps. It's easy to forget that battles are decided by individuals. Men like James Robert Mitchell, who looked at an impossible problem, invisible snipers killing his friends, and decided to solve it himself. He didn't wait for permission, didn't wait for proper equipment. He took what he had, ignored the laughter, went into the darkness alone. James's story isn't about killing. It's about what humans can accomplish when necessity demands innovation, when survival depends on creativity. He didn't have the best equipment. He made the equipment work through skill born from memory of a dead father. That's not just military history. That's human history. The ability to look at impossible problems and say, I'll figure it out. That's what won World War II, not industrial capacity alone. American soldiers who refused to accept that inadequate equipment meant defeat. They improvised, they adapted, they overcame. James with his father's rifle.
Thousands of others with their own innovations. Together, they proved that determination beats preparation when you're creative enough to turn obstacles into advantages. If this story moved you, hit that like button right now. Every like tells YouTube to share this with more people who need to understand that innovation comes from necessity, not always from laboratories. Subscribe and turn on notifications. We're bringing you stories like this every week. Forgotten innovations. Ordinary Americans solving extraordinary problems. The human side of history that textbooks ignore. Drop a comment right now. Tell us where you're watching from. Did anyone in your family serve in World War II? Pacific Theatre? European Theatre? What branch? What unit? Share their stories. These stories deserve to be remembered. The men who lived them deserve to be honored. You're part of making that happen. To Second Lieutenant James Robert Mitchell. And every soldier who proved that American ingenuity knows no limits when lives are on the line. We remember. We honor your service. We tell your stories because some histories are too important